everybody, welcome to EIS Live. Good to be back in the hot seat once again. Just talking to my friends about how we're all nervous whenever we do these things, and we hope it turns out okay, but I'm sure it's going to be great. And I'm sorry you don't see my studio behind me. We're live from my studio in my house. It's always that place anyway. But anyway, hope you don't miss that. Hope you like my guitars hanging on the wall. It's kind of fun doing it this way. But I always like to spend the first few minutes talking about EIS and who we are and what we do. So I know some of you do know EIS and know us and even partake of some of our services, and some of you don't. So EIS is a counseling, coaching, and mentoring entity that helps people find the freedom in their lives to become all they're intended to be, and basically to discover our why and our purpose. A couple of those big buzzwords that goes around all the time. How do we do that? We do it by employing a process that affords people the opportunity to go deep enough into their past to uncover their broken, unhealed, or undealt with areas that prevent them from discovering healthy patterns in life as individuals, in relationships, and in marriage, and business settings, employment settings, and so on, and helping to deal with the whole person and not just fix certain areas that we might think that are wrong with us that need fixing, and then we're going to get on with things and be okay. It's really a lifelong process that we're in, that we try to help people to start off, kind of kickstart you in that process, get used to it. We help you through that and hope that you can stay engaged in that process really the rest of your life, because life is a journey and a discovery that goes on forever. So we extend this process into leadership development as well, as we believe leadership starts from within and the home and is translated then outwardly from there. It's not just about being a great problem solver or decision maker or developing even a heart to lead, but really desiring to raise up the people that you're leading to be everything that they're called to be, instilling character, integrity, and accountability and other hallmarks of genuine leadership. And it's hard to do that when you haven't developed those attributes yourself. So we help with those things as well. So we believe we offer a comprehensive approach to personal growth and maturity and development, from the individual to the CEOs in business and everybody in between. That's the rest of us. Throughout the broadcast today, you'll see some banners on the screen, like you see crawling along the bottom there, that you can post your comments towards the end, so that we can answer your questions towards the end of the broadcast. You can post them anytime. And these live shows are here to feature testimonies of people whose lives have been changed and transformed, as we just talked about, that are still on their journey, of course, and other professionals in the field of helping people in similar ways to EIS. And also EIS staff counselors, that you're going to meet one of those today, and authors of books that we believe are important resources that support our work here at EIS. Getting out of breath here. And then finally, once again, before we get started, I just want to remind you to put up your questions so that we can answer those at the end of our time today. And but first, I want to introduce our media czar. That would be Vanessa Rallo. Here she is.
Hi, Bill.
Hey.
I like this background. It feels like we're in like a session together. I feel like comfortable.
Oh, look at that. Well, we could always do that's a good idea for a show. We could do a session. We'll call it Fly on the Wall, and everybody could be a fly on the wall on your session.
Oh, that would be scary. That would be scary. But interesting for other people to tune into.
Oh yeah, I'm sure we get a lot of comments on that one.
Very excited to be back here and to hear from our guests. It's going to be great.
Yes, and I always like to mention that you are our media czar who keeps everything rolling, from Instagram to these broadcasts and everything in between. So thanks for doing that, as always. I know that's why you get paid the big bucks for doing that, but you know. So without further ado, I want to talk a little bit about Jocelyn, who's going to be sharing with us today. She's no stranger to doing the work, which we talk about all the time here, is we need to be doing the work. And the reason we do the work is we all need to do the work to get rid of the baggage that we've accumulated in our lives as we've grown up into adulthood, largely. And again, I always kind of point out that, Vanessa, you're 21 years old, and I so appreciate you as a younger person, a young adult, and you know, your friends and people that are in your age group, kind of being, we bridge the generation gaps, right?
Yeah, it's crazy because I don't even think about that. Like when we're talking, it's just I think, like, for me, I think, like, you know me more than most people in my life do just based on temperament and all the things that we talk about, so I don't even see that, like, gap there. It's like, you're just Bill, my friend.
Aw. Well, it's true, and it is all about those relationships that we build. So I always appreciate that and being able to bridge that gap. And you're a big part of that doing these shows every week. So thank you for that.
Of course.
So this process, like I mentioned earlier, basically means we begin to take responsibility for our brokenness and dysfunction by working through these issues that, we do the work to dig up. And, we all have issues, of course, that we have to deal with. So Jocelyn is one of our EIS counselors, as well as a pastor at V1 Church. And she's going to share some of her story today and how, working through her own broken life issues, she developed a heart to help others in the same way. So let's welcome Jocelyn Perez. Hey.
Hey. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I'm Vanessa.
Thanks for doing this, Jocelyn. And I like your background. I like the plant in the corner there.
Thank you. Yeah. And my books, making sure I put my books there.
Yeah. It makes you look studious.
I read. Yeah. Gotta make sure,
Well, again, thanks for doing this. And, we talked a little bit earlier about some things, some points that we might want to bring up today. But I always like to start off with, letting everybody know that as counselors or leaders of any kind, nobody started, we were born leaders or born counselors or, we don't have it all together and we don't have all the answers, as much as some people might like to put that on us and think that we actually do, but we don't. We might know the one who has all the answers, and that's where we get our answers from, of course, and we help people lead them in the same direction. But, we're going to share some of your early, childhood stuff to kind of set the stage, because we all have a broken childhood in some degree or a manner or form, one way or the other, and traumas that we grew up in and all of that. So why don't we just start off by kind of introducing yourself and starting off in that area?
Okay, so my name is Jocelyn. I was born and raised in New York City, Queens, New York. It was actually a town or a borough in Queens. It was called Ridgewood. And I was born, I have 4 sisters, so I was one of 5. So my dad and mom had 5 daughters, and we're all like a year apart. And so it was an interesting time growing up in that home with all sisters, but we're really close, and I'm thankful for them. And so growing up in my home, we definitely lived a lower lifestyle. We were pretty poor, and we lived in an apartment building. And my dad and mom, their relationship was very codependent, where he was a bit of a narcissist. And growing up in a home where he was, I never knew what I was going to get with him. I needed to become a barometer and know, okay, well, how is dad going to be today? Am I going to get dad that's on 10, or am I going to get dad that's on 2, where his emotions and how he disciplines or how he interacts with us, I didn't always know. And so growing up that way, it just really made me become that barometer, learning how to fawn where I was people pleasing, learning how to please to make sure that I had dad on 2, and where there was peace in the home. So then I also learned how to create a false peace where it was like, okay, I've got to make sure that I'm well behaved, or that I'm doing what I have to do. Or if he asks me to do something, I would catch a bit of anxiety that I didn't get it done, especially with like homework or chores or things like that. And so it was really something I look back on now as I grew up, and I just saw how it went into my different years of life and how that was for me growing up, and how it was for me and my sisters, for all of us.
Go
ahead.
Sorry, just explain the word fawn for people so they understand what that means.
Fawn it's very much people pleasing, making sure that I was able to please him in whatever way I could. So whether it was like making jokes or making sure that he was okay by pleasing anything that he needed.
Yeah. So you keep the peace, You don't
Mhm.
make waves. If you see that he's upset, like that's what being a barometer means, is like you're always calculating, what he's gonna, what he might respond to, how he's gonna respond to it. You don't want to incur any damage or pain along the way. So
Yeah.
I wrote down the word false next to fawn because you said you kind of created that false self at that point.
Yes.
And I know, Vanessa, you could probably relate to some of this stuff too, and of course throw anything in you want. But yeah, fawning is a big deal, and especially when you're talking about these households where their codependency is kind of running rampant, and narcissism, of course, is at play, because as a kid, you don't really have even adults don't have the goods really to effectively deal with like narcissism in the home in a healthy way. They're going to react to it.
Yeah.
So of course you didn't know you were being equipped along the way,
Yeah.
for later years. But yeah, so okay, sorry, I just wanted to kind of bring some clarity to that for folks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
With
Go ahead.
Bill with fawning, I had no idea what that was, and Bill always drops, like, the truth bombs on Instagram, like, the reposts, and I remember you were sending that something that had, like, the different types of, I don't know what you would call that, but is that like a type of trauma or, like, trauma response, I guess you would say? Fawning? Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember you sent me and that was, like, something and I was like, "Wow, that's me." That really encompasses, like, how and it was a similar situation for me growing up where I was kinda the peacemaker and wanted to I was, like, the nucleus of everything, so I had to make sure all was good. But when you said, like, it created a false reality or a false peace, that was my experience growing up as well.
And it's a good time to point out too, Jocelyn, that this type of thing where there's narcissism in the home and codependency and all the stuff that you're going to be talking about, um, that's trauma.
Yes.
When our needs are not met, when they are violated, all those types of things in relationships with our parents, particularly, that's trauma. And a lot of people don't understand it either because they think the word trauma means like, well, somebody got killed in a car accident or something like that, or some loss like that. But it's this loss of identity, really, that is the most traumatic reality that just is the result of this every single time. And that's why we would create that false self, and we'll take on these coping and hoping mechanisms and survival techniques just to keep the ball rolling and survive. The problem is, like you said, you lost yourself in that.
Yes.
And
I
so, yeah,
did.
now we've told that part of your story. Keep
Yeah.
going.
All right. So, I mean, in my teen years, I really, like you said, Bill, like I just put on this false self and this false identity and not knowing who I truly was, what I wanted to be. I had no idea, no direction. And I became rebellious because of the way, my dad reacted in many instances growing up. And dads instill identity in daughters. And the identity that he instilled in me was very, very false because I had to figure it out on my own. So he didn't really instill much of an identity into me. He just, especially in the area of discipline, it just made me feel like I was never enough and that I didn't reach to his standard. And then just always feeling like I was never enough. My self-esteem was low. But then, yeah, I was very independent and rebellious and pushing back. And so if some of you follow the temperament, I am phlegmatic in inclusion, melancholy in control, and sanguine compulsive in affection. And so my phlegmatic and melancholy of just wanting to be very independent, and I would push back in rebellion toward him. And then I ended up being very codependent and wanting to defend my mom in their fights. So I was creating parental inversion, or parental inversion was created where I was inserting myself in their fights. I was becoming her defender. And then I would end up fighting with him and being the middleman. And I just carried that on for so many years into my young adulthood. And it just definitely started to affect even relationships after that. Even when I got married, it started to create that kind of thing for my relationships. And so that was really, really, those years really started to really form for me. And then just not knowing. And I just remember always thinking, even in my young adult hood, I was like, I am such a people pleaser and I just don't even know who I am. And I want to know who I am. I don't want to be a people pleaser anymore. I just want to be my true authentic self. And it really took lots and lots of years to really peel back those layers of not being a people pleaser, not wanting to defend my mom, and understanding the boundaries that I needed to create. And I moved out I think I was like 21, 22 years old, and I moved out of my home because I knew, even though I didn't have emotional intelligence at the time, I knew that I need something different, and I need it now. I really need to remove myself from this toxic environment because I knew it was toxic. There was lots of fighting, lots of superiority, and I just needed to get away from it. And I really desired deeply in my heart, what does healthy look like? What does healthy family look like? And I really searched through it in different relationships and friends. And I definitely searched and found some friends that had a little healthier. And so I kind of clinged more onto them. And then moving out really helped me, and just learning how to become an adult and start to really create my own roadmap in life and my own identity, and just really trying to find myself. And it really helped to be able to move out and just figure that part out of who I was. Yeah. And then in my young adulthood, trying to figure that out, trying to figure out who I was, and then getting married and meeting my husband. He was a person he's a supine, melancholy phlegmatic supine. And he was very unhealthy. He was an unhealthy supine. And getting married to him, I was like, especially being a sanguine compulsive, I was like, oh my gosh, he's so emo. I want to fix him. I want to take care of him and show him all the love and affection that he didn't receive. And my sanguine compulsive is like, I want to give him all the love because he's going to get so much better at being the person that he's supposed to be. And so it just really made me create a codependent relationship with him. We had lots of trauma bonding where I had a narcissistic father, and my mom was more like the person that bowed down to him, and my husband didn't have love and affection. And so we both had dysfunctional things going on in our lives, and we bonded through that trauma. So that love and affection, that my needs not being met by like my parents or my dad, and him not instilling identity in me, I was bonding over that with my husband that also didn't get that. So it's like, hey, we're both trying to figure out our identity. Let's do that together, and let's bond over that trauma we have. And that's what we did in the beginning of our marriage, which is terrible because it just created a pile of a mess in our marriage in the beginning. And so I know that through that in life, and just learning so much about my own self, and I needed to take my own responsibility for my own self and stop trying to fix him and putting him on this standard and having these high expectations on him, and not wanting to say I married my father, because I didn't. He wasn't like that. Thank God. But there was some parts of that where I attracted that covert narcissism, where it's like that emotional pull that my dad had on my mom. I did feel like in our marriage, we had that, where we just like pulled on each other emotionally, whether it was healthy or unhealthy, a lot of unhealthy at the time. And so just wanting to fix him.
Jocelyn, let me throw something in here, because this is a really important juncture for people to be hearing, obviously, because people are doing this all day long.
Yes.
Unbeknownst to them, when you don't understand your trauma, when you don't understand temperament, and knowing your particular needs, like you've been expressing, and we move on, and you said something very important, like, am I going to marry my father, kind of a thing. Well, a lot of times people do marry their mom or dad or both, embodied in another person, of course. And it may not be like they look like them or their act necessarily like them, but the needs that's where the temperament ties in, where the vows and judgments are made. Like I'll never be with anybody like my dad, stuff like
Yeah.
that. And then the temperament needed, like this was a setup from get go. He's a supine needing an initiator, somebody to give him all the love and approval and the affection, and who better suited but you. Not to mention, and maybe you can even elaborate on this too, is like when we say words again, kind of fawning, trauma bonding, what does that really mean? And I know you just started to talk about that, but I really want to elaborate on that so that folks can really kind of sink their teeth into this. And everybody who's watching or listening today, make sure that when you hear these words and we bring these descriptions, it's not just somebody else's story that you can go like, oh, that's cool. Like they fixed themselves up really good, and moved on. It's really about like, take a look at yourself and see if this stuff is in there. Like Vanessa shared too, like she had a lot of these very similar things going on in her household.
I noticed this just with most guests. It's like we all, like, even if the story isn't the same, there's just so many similarities I think that we all share. And I'm just grateful personally because I didn't know what most of any of this meant until I started the process. So actually hearing people talk about it and being able to relate is so important, because I think that's the first step in like, okay, this person went through this and they were able to fix it, or they're working on it, and just bringing attention and awareness to that, because a lot of the issues we have are similar, even if they might have not been like wrapped up the same way. I know I always relate to who we have on. Usually there's a bunch of stuff going on in my life for a very long time.
And Jocelyn, that's another thing that you said, and then I want you to elaborate a little bit more on this piece that you're talking about. When you said I didn't have the emotional intelligence or the awareness, and again, for everybody who's watching, emotional intelligence, you can translate that into self-awareness, basically, because without the self-awareness, you don't see any of these things, and you're just a pawn to the dysfunction and trauma that's inside of your own heart that keeps kind of leading you by the ear, into these relationships because you're broken. And you're going to gravitate towards, which is leading you right back into this place of trauma bonding. You're going to gravitate towards somebody who's similarly broken, or broken on the other side, that fits that mold perfectly. And then I love the way that you described it too. It's like, yeah, we're gonna fix each other up. We're gonna do this. It's gonna be great. No, it's not. It's gonna suck really bad. Because we got two people who are hot messes, right? And that's the big goofy lie about getting married. Like, we can conquer everything, especially when God's in the mix. God is going to help us do everything, and we get this pie in the sky, la la land notion of marriage, that it's going to fix things, when in fact it's a setup, because really it's designed to bring everything out of a person that needs to be brought out so that it can be healed.
Yeah, totally. And there's this book that I was reading, and there was a quote that I read in it, and I just really resonated with it. It said, "Woundedness is compounded self-doubt and guilt, resentment and disillusionment." Woundedness is compounded self-doubt and guilt, resentment and disillusionment. And I'm like, yes, I was disillusioned. I had self-doubt. I had plenty of resentment. And with the trauma bond, I had so much of that woundedness, and so did he. His mom died when he was 10, and he was pretty much felt orphaned, even though his family, tried their best to come into the picture and take care of him. But he didn't live with his dad, and he lived with his grandma, and there was a language barrier. And so he didn't have like the mothering growing up. And me being the caretaker, the savior, the sanguine compulsive that just wanted to love him, I bonded with that need of his, that trauma of his. And so we bonded over that trauma, where it was like, well, I can help fill those needs that you have. Meanwhile, I was just as wounded, and I was never going to be able to fill the void that he had. And even early on in our relationship, before we were even married, I remember telling him, like, you're not looking for a girlfriend. You're looking for a mom and dad. And I remember him weeping and crying that I got that revelation, and it was like a light bulb for him. Like, I do want a mom and dad, and I'm looking to you to fill those needs, but I really, really desire that deeply. And that was really something that was profound for us, but we still had no emotional intelligence. We were searching for it. We still didn't know. And we had our faith. And that was a big part of our world. But it was like we could have slapped all of the biblical truths on all of our pain, but it never really helped our pain. It was like, it's like just slapping the Band-Aid. But until that pain was able to come up and out, and for us to work on ourselves, that slapping all those biblical truths wasn't really helping us. It was just kind of putting that Band-Aid or having those behavior modifications, but only lasted for a little bit of time. It didn't last very long. Eventually, the pain came up. Eventually, it affected our marriage and bled into how we interacted with each other. And that really...
Coping and hoping mechanisms and survival techniques.
Yes. And then also disassociating. I'm being that I'm phlegmatic in inclusion, my phlegmatic really helped me disassociate and use that as a protection. When things got hard, I disassociated. When things got hard, okay, I don't have a lot of needs, so I'm just going to disassociate. I'm going to numb. I'm going to watch Netflix and binge watch and just totally disassociate. And that was just so easy that I'm like, no, I have to really, really understand where we are, because we almost ended up in divorce because it was just so bad. He ended up like, I laugh now because this was over 16 years ago, because we've been married 17 years. And I think my son was 1 year old, and he played video games all the time. And it was so annoying to me because he was totally disassociating as well, because all he did was play video games. And I had needs, and I'm screaming like, I have needs, pay attention to me. And he didn't. He just fell right into all those coping and hoping too. And so we almost ended up in divorce. And then we decided to reconcile after a while. And we didn't go for counseling right away. Eventually, we did some family counseling, but we really had to really take ownership of our own selves and really get into, okay, what's going on with us? And it wasn't perfect all the time, but we really started to see, okay, we both have needs that are not being met, and how can we serve each other in a way that we can be cohesive as parents and as husband and wife, and just understand each other, and not always look to the other to fill needs and like fight or disassociate. And so those were things that we were able to kind of walk through. And there was just so many layers that we had to peel back on, and just going through family therapy, because we had a son that was also on the spectrum of autism, and he was diagnosed early on. So there were so many different dynamics that were happening in our family. And one thing one of the counselor has said to us was, when a family has an autistic child, the husband leaves. She said 90% of the time. And when she said that to us, that really, really hit us hard, because I'm like, wow, like we would never want our child to like have a broken home, because we had all this trauma from our past, and we really wanted to work hard to create the best family dynamic we could with our child. And we had to learn new ways of even parenting, but then even new ways of being with one another and how we interact with one another. So that was like really, really hard, but we got through it. And going to family counseling was the best thing for us because it gave us a lot of truths and realities in that whole season when we were, first learning how to deal and cope and have intervention for our family with our son.
You mentioned something else earlier about peeling the layers back.
Yeah.
And especially with your husband, because supines are known for having layers upon layers and do a fine job of burying things really deeply.
Yes.
Which is, it speaks to this idea about a process, because process, Julie Signorelli was the one who said process with progress allows you to learn to love every version of yourself as you move forward. So when you're trying to, intervene in a marital situation, a family situation, and again, we want to avoid thinking that we're going to fix all these problems and then we're going to be fine. It's really about being enlightened to the truth, getting that self-awareness, bumping up our emotional intelligence quotient so that we're understanding things, we're seeing things from a different angle.
Yeah.
The disillusionment, the disassociation, all the symptoms that we were displaying will slowly start to wane. And you also said something else very important, is that, you both wanted to take personal responsibility, which is one of the hallmarks of what we present here, at EIS, is that's why we don't jump right into couples counseling right away, because we want to separate the people, let them understand their temperament, let them start looking at their own layers of baggage so they can take responsibility for themselves and see what their role in this situation has been, so that we don't wind up with, all this going on.
Yes. Yes.
In every session. Well, if he'd just stop doing that, I'd be okay, well, if she'd just do that better, I'd be okay. And it's not about that at all. Like you're sharing, it's really about taking that personal responsibility. And then I'm assuming that in that counseling modality that you were in and pulling back those layers, what was for you before getting involved with us? What did that look like for you in terms of counseling?
So with counseling, I really needed to, I was on that journey of remember what I said before about just learning my authentic self, being a people pleaser, just all that false identity that I had put on. And so during counseling, I was able to look at where were some of the areas in my life that false identity started. And so I remember my counselor just kind of bringing me through a journey of hey, let's look back on where this false identity started to come in. And I just really started to remember one moment where I was getting bad grades, I was not doing well in school, and I was really struggling, and I didn't know how to say I needed help because of the inconsistency in the home. And I remember my dad saying, he actually punished me for failing. And I remember getting a spanking for failing. And I just remember that moment. I think I was in third grade. And I just remembered being in so much trouble for failing and being so afraid because I was going to get a spanking. And when I did, and so we were able to kind of process through that moment of the identity and what I started to put on myself, where the low self-esteem started to happen. And then me being able to allow healing and compassion to come into my heart and not be so disassociated from that moment, from that pain that started to happen and carry it on throughout my adult life. And how I viewed myself, what I thought about myself, the self-sabotage, the self-hatred, all of those things that kind of made me feel those things by getting in trouble for failing. And it just really started to peel back many layers, how I started to see I have fear of failure. I have fear of authority figures over me. I have fear of not doing the right thing. It was just really hard. Even in my marriage, having fear of failure in that, where I felt like, my husband, I'm afraid of failing with him. And it was just so much pain that I had to really process through, allow healing to come in, really connect to the areas of my emotions, and deal with them and face them. And whether I cried it out or did some heart work, it just really helped me peel back a lot of the layers and really look at myself, really take that mirror and look at myself and what was truth and what wasn't.
Ness, can you relate to any of this?
Yeah, all of it. I just want to hear more. I'm like sitting here, like everything you say just like hit something in my heart. And especially like for me, the disassociating was so real, where most of the time I didn't even know what I was feeling until maybe it like blurted out in like a session with Bill, or if I was upset, and then it's like, wow, I'm like really out of touch with my emotions. Like I gotta dig through and figure this out. And peeling back the layers has been a personal journey of mine as well, because I was so many things for so many different people that I was never actually Vanessa. So discovering who Vanessa actually is yeah. And in a similar situation where I was, I'm still in a relationship. I was in a relationship for a few years before like meeting with Bill. So I also had a lot of those different dynamics as well, where I actually viewed like my boyfriend as the person that saved me, as opposed to like the person that was going to save him. So like all of those things are just, they're so true.
I just popped up a quote from Mark Twain. It's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you think you know for sure that just ain't. And when we think that, we know we're broken, but if we're confronted on things or presented with things, isn't it amazing how we'll balk? And even when we're seeking help, it's like, oh, no, that's not it. It's this. And that's a hitch that we can really get stuck in, in the counseling modalities, it's like, I don't know, the counselor's not very good. I should find somebody else who really gets it, when they're presenting absolute truth to us, but we're so steeped in what we think we know that we really don't know. It's not the stuff that we actually don't know that's hurting us, because that's the stuff we need to know. So we're enlightened, and that self-awareness can grow, and that discernment can grow, and break through all that disillusionment that you mentioned earlier, and so on, and then making way for us to take that responsibility.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So much disillusionment. We all have it. Well,
especially in marriage.
Yes, we dream of what it's going to look like, how we're going to do it better than our parents did. And then we just fail because of all the disillusionment, all the expectations that our spouse doesn't meet. And then we're let down, where we feel disappointed and heartbroken over it. And it's just like, okay, when is it going to change? And it's like, until you take ownership, until you start to peel those layers back, then it's going to change.
Yeah. Wow. What a journey you've been on.
Yeah. It's been quite a journey.
Well, we were talking a little bit earlier about, I guess, the next area. I think that would be coming next would be the thing about your mom.
Yeah.
And so that was, I think that was another life-changing season for you. Yeah.
Yes. So my mom passed away last year in February. And so it was really hard. And I remember I was talking to Bill earlier about this. It was really hard not really seeing that reconciliation. Like, my parents never divorced, but never really seeing the reconciliation and redemption of their relationship. And that was really hard for me to kind of sit with, because I really wanted to see some sort of reconciliation. She was young. She was only 63. And it really was hard for me. And I remember recently I had a conversation with my dad about just different things in life. And he asked me, was I a good parent? And I said, Dad, when it was good, but there was never consistency with you. And I never knew what I was going to get. I never knew the dad I was going to get. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't want to psychoanalyze you. And I know, I'm a counselor. And then I just really started to tell him through my lens what it felt like. Just the inconsistency, the barometer, the relationship dynamic between him and my mom. And he said, I'm really sorry for putting some of the things that I put on you to carry, and even some of my personal journey. I should have never put that on you as a child. And I'm really sorry that I did that. And it just really brought so much healing for him to say that, because I had so much resentment toward him. And then when my mom getting sick in the end, I really disassociated, just not wanting to deal with the wanting to be codependent and defend her and fix it. And so I disassociated. And that is something that I think there was parts of me that regretted, but just allowing us to have that conversation was so healing. To be able for him to say he was sorry for doing that was just so amazing and healing for me.
Yeah, that when we talked about that earlier, that was a big deal. Talk a little bit about just the grieving process and going through that, and you're still in that, of course.
Yeah, so I am still kind of going through that grieving process. It comes in waves. Sometimes I wish she was here when we had something special, or if I did something, calling her up and just sharing with her. I miss that. But one thing that I was able to work through with my counselor was being able to say, to kind of face my situation with my mom, being mad at her for never being powerful enough to make and defend herself. And I really had to face that. And I went on that journey of kind of telling her, not that I was speaking to her, but just kind of facing and saying, Mom, you were powerful enough, but I have to give that over to you. I can't carry it anymore. You're in the afterlife and you're in the pearly gates, and I cannot carry that anymore. And so releasing that and allowing that pain to come up and out, and not burying it and not burdened with it, it really helped me to heal and say, what, it wasn't mine to carry, and I'm not going to carry it anymore. And that really kind of helped me through that process. And just really working on not disassociating with the grief. When the pain comes up, when I'm feeling the grief, I allow myself to feel it, to allow that process to kind of happen. And whatever layers are going to come up, they're going to come, whatever comes up, it's going to come up, and I'm going to deal with it as it comes.
That's really so huge, because I tell people all the time is, as many people think that, if somebody's passed, they'll never be able to get things right with that person, or, say the things that they wanted to say, and no reconciliation is possible. And what I always tell them is they'll always have the ability to do that within themselves with God's grace, because God is the one we really have to do with, if you will,
Yeah.
Like you did. You got your heart right with God. He was there to take that burden from you. Even though your mom, like you said, she's already, with the Lord and all that. And you have that confidence as well, that your heart is now clear and you're free to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And because so many times in life, we just never, sometimes we don't have an opportunity to reconcile with somebody. I know in my own experience, being a melancholy compulsive, being, staunchly independent and stubborn, there's been a lot of times that I just didn't want to reconcile with people, and I really had to learn. I could forgive people, it's so much harder to, like, for example, to trust and then to reconcile with people. I can forgive people very easily. Something happens. I mean, I believe I've cultivated that over the many years, of just like, you know what, I'm just not going to go there. I let love cover a multitude of sins, but that reconciliation part, and it seems like you really found that in a real genuine way so that your heart could be released. And then you tied it into like, I have to do that so I can be free to be the real me.
Yes.
And I actually did a daily a couple of days ago on that. Like we can't be our genuine selves fully and completely if we still have unforgiveness and bitterness in our hearts, and these areas and pockets of unreconciled relationships, and all of that, because it taints our hearts.
Yes.
So what you just shared is so super important for people to hear. Is like, yes, it's possible to do that. And in fact, like we need to do that. We need to look for those broken relationships in our hearts so that we can get those things right. And we can do that with another. I will quote it out of James, the book of James. It says, "Confess these things to one another so that you can be healed." Even just going to God straight isn't enough, and it's not me saying that; it's Him saying that. He set it up so that we would go to somebody else. And that's why I asked you to share about your counseling experience yourself, having become a counselor, on the backside of all of that is like, what was that like? So it sounds like you found somebody who was really leading the way for you.
Yes. In Proverbs, in Proverbs 15:13, it says, a happy heart makes the face cheerful, but heartache crushes the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And Proverbs 17:22 says, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up bones. And it was like, what parts of my heart had dried up? What parts of my heart in this time of bitterness, resentment, unforgiveness, hurt, pain, all the woundedness, what was dried up in my heart? And I really needed to go to connecting with those areas of my heart and allowing that compassion and healing to come in to be able to I literally went on exploration with that area of those areas of my heart. And there was just so many. And I often do that with some of my clients, like, hey, let's explore those areas of our hearts and connect to those emotions and allow that healing to come in and compassion. And let's get those dried up areas. Let's have life, let it be brought back to life.
Mm-hmm. So then, just because we're starting to get a little short on time, and folks, if you want to ask some questions, now's the time to do it for sure. For Pastor Jocelyn to answer and give her comments on. Just that the last part of this would be moving ahead, into, a church role in ministry and church and working with people there. And then along the way, coming to EIS as well. Now, of course, you laid the groundwork quite nicely for like your own experiences.
Yes.
And all of your brokenness qualifying you, which we talk about all the time as well. Your brokenness does not disqualify you. It actually qualifies you if you'll allow it to be healed and you'll do the work like you're expressing today. So maybe just share a little bit about, that transitioning over into these areas here that you're working in now.
Well, in my young adulthood, I always kind of worked in ministry, volunteering and things like that. So that was something that I always had a heart for, just living out that in my life. But then moving into ministry and like even as an adult now, just a little bit more as a pastor, my husband and I both knew that we were called to that ministry of pastoring, being that I was always a caretaker. I remember asking myself these questions like, what is it that people come to me most for? Because I believe that was going to be what I knew the calling of my life was. What do people come to me most for? And then it was like, people always came to me for counsel. And I've always sought wisdom and counsel. And I said, I think I really have a heart to counsel and care for others and mentor people. And so I was able to kind of really come into that in ministry as a care pastor at V1 Church, and my husband as well. And we do that together, and we do premarital marriage counseling. And we just love doing that and just like kind of walking couples through that in ministry. And then coming into EIS and getting to do this as a job has been such a blessing. Just seeing people get free, seeing people get some reconciliation in their lives. It's just very life-giving to me. And I just love it. It's been such a life changer. Doing temperament counseling or just even learning about my temperament was just a whole other layer of getting to know myself, getting to know my husband. When I saw his temperament, it just like my heart broke, because I studying it and really knowing what all of the temperaments mean really gave me a whole different lens to my husband, to myself. And I would say that was the biggest thing of really getting to know myself, was that temperament and just knowing who I was, knowing my tendencies, knowing my traits. And so that was something that I loved to do and do with others. And just really, really counseling them and walking them through those areas of pain, compassion, healing, things like that.
Yeah, temperament is totally key. And it's amazing. And it's really, what, a couple of years that you've been with us?
1 year. 1 year. This November, it just started 1 year.
Was that the beginning of the training in temperament? Or was
No, that was just coming on board. Yeah. So the training I started in, I would say February, March.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's amazing to me how, you pick that up, but you're such a great candidate for that, and, again, our brokenness is our qualifier. So if people are watching and listening, and they're feeling like, their problem is just too big, or it's too hard to understand, or it's just too complex, just that temperament test alone is such a door opener to, Vanessa mentioned it earlier. It's just like, I knew so much about her just walking in the door, just because I knew her temperament. Right. And, I think it's easier to trust the process when your counselor has such insight so rapidly, into your situation and who you are and your propensities and your strengths and weaknesses. And so much of this is really learning about that. Then you can look through that lens and look back and say, no wonder I screwed up so badly. My needs weren't being met. I had no idea what my strengths were, my weaknesses were. I operated largely out of my weaknesses. Now I have an opportunity to turn that around, learn my strengths, operate out of those, build boundaries, all the healthy stuff. Get rid of my codependency, all the stuff that you had mentioned earlier, be aware of that through self-awareness and discernment. And all of those things that we teach folks, that's so many times, that's the first way in, is understanding that temperament.
Yes, completely. It was life-changing. It really was.
And here you are now, you're a temperament counselor.
Yes, and I love it so much.
That's awesome. I don't see any questions popping up. Vanessa, did you have anything that you wanted to kind of pour in here towards the end?
No, I'm just reading all the comments, and there's so much love, but I see people just sharing a bit about their own struggles. I think someone said, like, it's hard to find the right person, I think, to open up to. If there's something, I think, if you could recommend to someone who maybe hasn't engaged in the process yet, and it doesn't have to necessarily be with us, but finding the right counselor for you, what is something that you would recommend that for someone looking to go on that journey, or maybe doesn't know where to start?
I think I would say committing to starting, finding a counselor and starting there, really starting to, even though it hurts, there's going to be a pruning process that's going to happen. Pruning hurts, but we need it to grow. And so I would say start looking for a counselor. Take the first step in making that phone call, making the appointment, meeting the person, and having an open mind and say, you know what, I want to learn and grow. The process, I need to change in this process, and it's going to be okay. And showing yourself compassion and saying, you know what, it's okay. You're going to get through this. This is for you. This is going to be your time to invest in yourself, because the greatest investment is the investment you put into yourself and getting healthy emotionally. And so that's what I would say to someone that's looking for counseling.
Guess what? You just got 2 comments of people that are going to commit to starting.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah, that's a big step for people to make, and again, dispelling this idea that, well, counseling means something's wrong with me, and it's still, I think the word counseling and implicates psychotherapy perhaps. And it sounds, I don't want to feel like something's wrong with me. And then we minimize our problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just talking to a guy the other day that, his eyes got opened like really fast. He's 43, gone through several broken relationships, got married, never should have gotten married, walked away from counsel, thought he knew what he was doing. Like the quote I said from Mark Twain before, it's the stuff he thought he knew for sure that got him in trouble.
Right.
And already in another relationship. And I said, you really ought to just not do that for a while. And I said, because if you're telling me that you go through 2-year cycles with this stuff, what's going to happen is you're sad that you're 43 and going through it now. You're going to be 45 and going through it again.
Yeah.
Because we double down and do the things that we don't know how to do. We do more of them and expect that to work. And that's basically the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, especially more of it, and do it harder is not going to work. It's just going to keep getting worse over the years. And we can go on that way for a lifetime. And that's the sad part of it. We don't have to do that. There's help there for folks to do. And that's what EIS is really all about. So having you on board, Jocelyn, is just such a tremendous blessing. Not just because of education, again, or being a great leader, which you are. It's really about having the goods because you went through this stuff yourself. You know what it means to peel back the layers. You know what it means to go through healing. You know what it means to take responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So thank you so much for that. I see a lot of comments that people are going to watch the rebroadcasts.
Yeah, we got a lot of emojis, fire, thumbs up, all the things, sending so much love. It's awesome.
I don't know whether you can see those comments on your screen, Jocelyn, but
no, I can't. I don't see them anywhere.
It's on the right-hand side, if in like the top-ish corner, it says comments, but
oh, okay, there we go.
Yeah, there's been, I don't know, quite a few of them today.
Oh, look at Peter saying pruning hurts. Yes, it does, Peter.
And starting to look at counsel from a different angle,
Yes. Yes.
And again, like I certainly tell people all the time, is I'm not a school, I am school taught, but my school taughtness doesn't qualify me, and it doesn't you either. It's really about taking that responsibility, walking through the fire yourself, allowing, basically God to burn all that stuff off that isn't of him, to unearth everything that's been broken, that's been codependent, all the things you mentioned earlier, because of the toxic environment that you lived in, all the codependency, the fawning, all of it.
Yes.
And having dragged it all, and again, I just repeat myself over and over again because we need to hear it over and over again. I believe if you're dating, you're engaged, you're going to get married, this is the time to do this. Don't fool yourself and go into la la land, like you mentioned, like, oh, it's going to be great. We can conquer anything.
That was me, right?
I didn't want to say anything.
It's okay. Everything you were saying, I'm like, wow, it's like we're in a session together. I was the one that thought I was going to ride off into the sunset when I got married. So it's okay.
Yeah. And
I was like 19 coming to Bill, like, guess what? I'm going to get married and everything's going to be good. And then he was like, no. And then I got very upset and slammed my laptop and was like, I'm not going back. But he was right.
Yeah. And it was really hard to hear all of these truths, right?
Yeah, really hard. But I'm so grateful that I did and that I'm continuing to, because my parents are divorced, and if I went that route, I'm sure I probably would have ended up in the same place where I started, with those judgments of, oh, I'll never be divorced, like you said. So
Well, again, we're running out of time. So, Jocelyn, thank you so much.
Thank you.
My guess is, yeah, we're going to see tons of reposts on this one. And again, for everybody who's watching, please share this with your friends. It's going to be right up after this, Ness, I guess, on YouTube and Facebook, correct?
Yeah, and I think maybe even Jocelyn, if there's like a way people can find you, like I don't know, if, like on like social media or an email.
Yeah, so on Instagram, you can find me on Jocelyns Perez _ and my email is eis.jocelyn@gmail.com.
And that's JOCELYN.
Yeah.
Okay. One last thing. Do you got a book you want to recommend to folks?
Yes. So for the married folks, because I was really thinking about that today, The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller really transformed my husband and I marriage by really digging into this. And this is just taking the responsibility. It really, really is a great, great book to do together. And they also have like a devotional that you can do together as a couple. And so that's a really good book I wanted to recommend.
Awesome.
Anything else? The process.
Well, it's time for the shameless plug.
Bill Hoffman.
So
there you go.
The reason we like to recommend this really, and I always have it crazy over here, is that it really outlines the process. I think it's done quite simply and easy to read, but just chock full of great stuff to help you understand what a process can look like and the elements of the process particularly so that you can engage in it. And by the way, we're getting near the end of the second book, which is a journal and devotion combo that lasts a year. You can use it for an entire year.
Amazing.
Walking through the process. And so I'm so excited about that, to be a companion for this. And for people who are, you don't have to be, coming for counseling to do it. I think it's a great way to kind of tread out into the water a little bit, test the waters of, kind of looking at yourself and working on yourself a little bit. And, seeing that need and being able to start working on yourself some. And then the second book is this one here. I've recommended this before. It's called Trauma Bonding by Annalie Alexander, Dr. Annalie Alexander. We've talked about trauma bonding today. It's an important topic. There's a lot more of that going around than you might think.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you again, Jocelyn. Thank you, Vanessa, so much for being here. I know you got to run to a meeting as well after this. And so tune in next week for another special guest. And we're not going to tell you who it is because we don't know who it is yet.
Giving up our secrets.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Bill, so much.
Jocelyn. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
So we know what time it is, Ness, right?
Yeah. EIS out.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.